Okay, item 13. The Auckland Regional Amenities Draft Funding Plan. We have got Alistair and Josie. Kia ora and welcome. Now we have Josie.
Thank you, Your Worship.
I would like to acknowledge sitting in the bleachers Vern and many representatives of the ARAFIB organisations.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and Councillors. The purpose of this report is to approve a submission on behalf of Auckland Council to the Auckland Regional Amenities Funding Board draft plan for 2016-17. The Funding Board will consider all the submissions that they receive, and Council will make a final decision to approve the funding levy at the Finance and Performance Committee at the March meeting. The draft funding plan is attached at A and details the provisional allocations of funding as determined by the Funding Board, and it's currently under public submission. The final date for those submissions is tomorrow, Friday the 19th of February. In the normal course of events, this report would go to the Finance and Performance. However, due to the timing of the submissions closing tomorrow, we need to request approval of Council submission at this meeting. The draft funding plan, a few details about that, proposes for 16-17 a levy of $16,142,000, representing an increase of $994,000. This is 6.5% above the 15-16 levy. It's a little bit difficult to do a like-for-like comparison because in the 15-16 levy, the Auckland Rescue Helicopter Trust did not make an application to the funding plan. However, Auckland Council provided a capital grant through the long-term process of $450,000. If we add that $450 to the 15-16 plan, then the increase on the 16-17 is 3.5%. In the funding plan, the Funding Board are also recommending a 1.7% increase in the Funding Board remuneration, which will not incur any additional requirements in their administration budget. It will be absorbed. The outline key points of the submission attached at C. We will, Council, acknowledge the Funding Board and the amenities for the contribution to Auckland. Note the increase to ratepayer funding since the Act came into force, and including the future funding years requests for 17-18. Council also notes that after a period of significant increases, most of the amenities should now be reaching a level of funding that provides a degree of sustainability, and large increases should not be required in the future. Council is asking the Funding Board to progress the recommendation with the amenities from the 2015 Council ARAFA review, which is to examine sustainable funding for each amenity. We're also asking the Funding Board request the amenities to maintain a focus on accessing alternative revenue streams and to monitor the events of the Arts Festival annualisation. We do make a note regarding the increased remuneration and suggest that the Funding Board consider the approach used in the governance manual. Happy to take any questions, Your Worship.
Alistair, you've been so long in this matter. Is there anything you would like to add of wisdom?
Mr Mayor, I don't think I have a great deal of wisdom left to add, which is why I've handed this over to Josie to manage from here on in.
Great entertainment value at the very least, anyhow, Alistair. Okay, any questions, comments or queries, councillors? Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, team. Just looking at the principles of the Act on 105, one of the things that has to be given regard to, and the words under H on 105, should have regard to Auckland Council's proposed rate increases. So at the moment we've got a proposal, but the real proposal will be later in the year. So how do we have a little insurance policy in there for the possibility of, who knows, we might be dropping a percentage point off that rates increase. How if we arrive at that position, how does that get reflected?
I think it's, through the Chair, very important to remember the statutory context we're in here, and we had a judicial review over whether that new funding principle in effect acted as a cap on the levy. It is only something that the funding board needs to have regard to. It does not limit their decision making in any way. So we can only provide some guidance as to what our rates increase will be. The funding board takes that into consideration. If that changes by 1% or 0.5%, unfortunately that does not tie in with the decision making under the Act, because first of all the decisions have to be made in regard to the levy before the annual plan is finalised, and second of all because of the independence of the funding board guaranteed under the Act, we cannot put a de facto cap on the levy increases.
Okay, I understand that entirely. Is there further opportunity other than this submission to write to the funding board, or is this it at this stage? If we landed an annual plan which had a percentage point off it in the rates increase.
Chris, I'll intercede there. Look, I think that we've obviously got a statutory framework in which we have to operate in, and this is the opportunity. But we do consider all final submissions on the annual plan, and if there was anything that required a bit more discussion, then I suspect the chair and her support, and Alistair, would reflect that back to Arafa. But I think that this is the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. I've made the point.
The only thing I would add to that, Mr Mayor, if I may, is that there have been meetings between Vern Rolshan and Nita Killeen, the Chair and Deputy Chair of the Arafa Board, along with Councillor Penny Webster and Ross Crowe through this process to try to get as much of a shared understanding about the financial pressures of Council as we go through the process.
Cheers. Very good.
Councillor Penny.
Well, I'll move the submission and remind councillors that yes, because we changed the meeting around for this month, the amenities, some of the amenities are coming to the finance and performance next week, and then in March the others. Can I thank Josie and Alistair for the considerable work that's gone on in the last 12 months on this subject, and also Vern and his team, because we have worked very closely. I think they do get the message. Obviously there is an issue with the sustainability. When is something sustainable and when isn't it? But I think the goodwill that works between the council and that organisation will go a long way to them understanding our issues. So happy to move it, Mr Chairman.
Very good. Is there a seconder? I'll second it. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Well done. Josie and Alistair. Thank you, and good to see all the Arafa team. Right, item 14. Item 14. Local government election year policy for elected members. We have a supplementary report. Have you all got your supplementary?
No.
No, we're getting it now.
Are we trying to be paperless?
All right. You're about to get it, it appears. Warwick.
Your Worship and Councillors, I acknowledge firstly the contribution from the local boards, so all the local boards have had an opportunity to make comment on a draft that went out. The draft has been changed where we could change it, and the report contains comments on other aspects raised by local boards. The proposed policy is based on the existing policy. It's presented in a slightly different way, highlights two key issues, and also presents a concept around members wearing two hats. So you have an election. Some of the candidates at election get elected and from then on make the decisions of the council, and then you, over 3 years, and then the next elections crop up, and when that occurs, sitting members continue to make the decisions of the council, provided the appropriate resources to do that, but at the same time wear a totally different hat of being candidates for the upcoming election. And so the thrust of the policy is to present that kind of picture, and to say that those hats need to be kept separate, and there needs to be transparency around that. The guidance in the policy is based on guidance from the Auditor General. It's an audit issue. We've got Nick Rennie here from our internal audit area to assist us with this. Apart from the concept of wearing two hats, the policy also presents two key principles. The first principle is that council resources should only be used for council purposes, and that's true at all times. The second principle follows on from that and explicitly states that council resources should not be used for re-election purposes. The key change that members will notice in terms of this policy over the previous policy is in relation to use of communication technology, and explicitly the use of mobile phones. So last time the governing body resolved to allow the use of mobile phones if there was reimbursement. Our view is that reimbursement doesn't solve the issue. The issue is having the use of council resources and using them for re-election purposes. And by way of explanation, for example, everybody's got the use of council email facilities. It costs nothing to send an email, but it's simply not appropriate to send an electioneering email from a council email address. And perhaps if I could just read a bit from the Auditor General's guidance. A council would be directly promoting a member's re-election prospects if it allowed the member to use council communications facilities such as stationery, postage, internet, email or telephones explicitly for campaign purposes. So based on that, we believe we can't make an explicit provision in the policy around that.
Okay. All right, well, of course, we've been doing elections for a long time and new technology changes all the time. And so I guess when in doubt, kick for touch and make sure that you are protecting the wider public interest. And so I really appreciate the amount of thought that you've given to trying to set a fair and even playing field, but at the same time respecting what would be regarded as financial probity in terms of the ratepayer. So I think you've struck a good balance. Councillor Penny, do you have your hand in the air there? No? Councillor Lynn.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Yep.
There's a couple of comments in here that I just want clarification on. So we've got page 190 in attachment A, 31, criticism of an elected member candidate by another sitting member on any council-funded communication. So just for example, recently had a local board member criticising the governing body in a local paper and signing their name local board member. Is that considered the use of their position as a criticism of current sitting members?
Your Worship, the principle...
And I don't know how they sent the email to the paper, but it could have been on... But is that...
The principle behind this is about not using council resources to electioneer. Fully expect that everybody standing for the election will have their own websites, etc., and will criticise as much as they like existing decisions. The Code of Conduct requires us to not make it personal. We should stick to issues. But it's to do with the use of council resources.
Okay, and the other one is Principle 11 around using council resources, and it talks about for example, phones, and some of the feedback from some of the local boards say that it's unreasonable to expect to carry around 2 phones or have 2 phones, etc. And I know a lot of people here have 2 phones, and we manage it very well. And it says it applies at all times, not just during election year. And so, is it acceptable that people will say, well, I'm using a council phone because that's all I've got? I mean, my understanding is most people would have a phone before they got elected, and they'll continue to have a phone after they get elected. How is that dealt with? Because I see it happening a lot, and I don't think it's something you can police, but, you know, it's... We say that here, but how do you enforce that?
Your Worship, it isn't something